All right, Mark Rogers TV talking some Florida State football. We bring in David Visser from Tomahawk Nation. It's the SB Nation platform for Florida State athletics. David, first time on with us here. We appreciate it. How you doing?
Doing great, Mark. Thanks for having me.
Definitely. So Florida State primed in most people's eyes for a ACC and the national championship run. Any areas of concern, positional battles that we can look out for in August camp?
Of course. And naturally, I think, as it usually does, it starts up front, specifically on the offensive side of the ball. This is kind of an odd patchwork offensive line right now. Jimbo Fisher's been quoted as saying, I believe at ACC Media Days, that, well, 4 of the 5 guys have started games. That's true, but they've kind of been around the line in different places. They've had a couple starts here and there. And, of course, all they have to do is open up against Alabama. So this is going to be really interesting. The one guy who doesn't have a start is Josh Ball, who we're expecting to start, of all places, at left tackle. So this is just going to be really interesting. Rick Trickett, the offensive line coach, is famous for bringing in sometimes unheralded yet super talented guys. So it'll be interesting to see just how far he's been able to bring them along when they get Alabama, and then they get Louisiana Monroe after that, and then it's Miami and NC State, 2 of the more talented defensive lines in the country. So I think that's where it really starts. And that's all about keeping DeAndre Francois upright. I can't believe how many times that guy got up last year. He really had no business with the punishment he was taking. And they really need him again this year, because behind him, yikes, you got a true freshman in Bailey Hockman. And then you got J.J. Cosentino, who's been there for what seems like a decade and has just never really shown the knack to be able to step in and play D1 quarterback. So keeping Francois healthy this year is actually more important than it was last year when they had Sean McGuire there.
So the team's loaded, and when you look at recruiting rankings, Florida State ranks right up there with the other couple schools that we would name each and every year: Alabama, Ohio State, etc. Roderick Johnson's gone. You mentioned Ball, who comes in as a top 20 recruited offensive tackle out of Virginia. The left side's pretty much wiped out. So what is it with offensive line? That's been the bugaboo the last few years for this Seminoles program.
Yeah, and I mean, it's not that they haven't brought up some good guys. Cam Urban was a first-round draft pick to Cleveland. Rod slid, I think, a little farther than most people thought. He didn't have a great season last year and really could have stood to have come back. They just injuries. That's been one thing. I think that they tend to get ahead of themselves a lot. Fisher runs a complex offense, a complex pro-style offense, and a lot is made of that often. And it's specifically usually put on the receivers with regard to why young receivers don't hit the field earlier. But I think that sometimes the young offensive linemen tend to try to overthink a little bit too much. You see a lot of false start penalties from this group, and it's routinely attributed to those guys basically trying to get started too quickly because they've got so much going on in their heads.
Yeah, you mentioned Francois. I think what he turned in last year was one of the more remarkable seasons out of the freshman that you could imagine, because of what you just mentioned. He was constantly coming off the deck, getting hit in the mouth, and so throw out the stats. They're not bad, but they're not as remarkable as the performance was on the field. So if he can have a clean pocket like half the time, that's going to feel like a luxury to him. So I think he's the best quarterback in the conference, and even though the Heisman Trophy went to someone else, deservedly, but I think he's the best quarterback all around because of what he can do with his arm.